quite as often as I could have. Maybe I didn't hold you all those lonely, lonely nights. And I guess I never told you I'm so happy that you're mine. Maybe I didn't treat you.
Good morning all. I'm Daniel Strickland of RJ Sydney Craig. It's my privilege and honour to be here today as we pay tribute to the life and memory of David Scott Hamilton, who was born to this life on Sunday the 22nd of December 1940 and departed from this life on Sunday the 5th of May 2024. I'd now like to call forward Marilyn with the first reading.
We've all come together today to say our goodbyes, but no one wants to see you go, and we're all left asking why. In our pain and tears, we share a heartache that we cannot heal, and in our minds, we keep our memories that no one can ever steal. We all can feel your hands in ours and see your loving face. You haven't gone, I feel you here, a love I can't replace. You meant so much to each of us. In our hearts you'll always be. I know you knew how precious you were to them, to us, to me.
We are gathered here today to support David's wife Lorraine, his daughters Rosalind and Marilyn, and their respective families, to honour a colleague and departed friend, to show sympathy and empathy to the bereaved, and to take our leave with due reverence of his mortal body. We come today believing that all human life is valuable, that the truth, integrity, and hopefulness which resides in each of us lives on. We come believing that David's life, which we honour today, is joined in the continuum of human endeavour, stretching into the past and into the future. We come today believing that David's life was lived in its uniqueness and has now passed into the ultimate community of human existence. Whilst we can never fully capture the life of a person, we can only know of glimpses and moments that give us some understanding of the life that was lived. We respect David's journey through life with all of its realities and uncertainties, and we pray that he will travel safely as he embarks on this part of his journey. Death has come to David as it will eventually come to each of us. And it is, at times such as this, we need to remind ourselves that only nature itself is permanent, and that all that has life has its beginning and eventually has its end. Life exists in the time span between the birth and death of individuals who, in turn, pass on the processes and experiences of life through those who are close to them. The final parting signified by the death of a loved one is bound to bring shock and great sorrow. Whenever the ties of love and friendship are broken, at times that parting can also bring a certain relief from a life of pain and suffering that has come to a completion. However, regardless of those circumstances, those who feel and love deeply will grieve deeply, and no system of belief, philosophy or religious conviction ever taught can prevent this wholly natural reaction of the human heart. Whatever relationships and enterprises the death of David has broken in upon, we can be certain that he is now eternally at peace. And whilst you mourn David's departure from this life and feel the hole this leaves in your hearts, you should honour and cherish the times you shared with him and the richness those times brought to your lives. We're now going to pause to hear some tributes from Chief Inspector Richard Steinborn, APM, on behalf of the New South Wales Police.
Service history of Senior Sergeant David Scott Hamilton. registered number 10800. Joined the New South Wales Police Force on the 28th of October 1963 and served faithfully and diligently until the 22nd of December 1995. His promotion history: upon joining the police force in October 1963, he was promoted to probationary constable. In October 1964, he was promoted to the rank of constable. On the 28th of October 1968, he was promoted to the rank of constable first class. On the 28th of October 1972, he was promoted to senior constable. And in December 1979, he was promoted to the rank of sergeant third class. In the 25th of April 1987, he was promoted to sergeant second class. On the 28th of December 1987, he was promoted to the rank of senior sergeant. David served after graduating from the Police Academy in 1963 in No. 9 Division at Burwood, performing general duties. In April 1964, he transferred to No. 9 Division Ashfield, again performing general duties. On the 28th of December 1964, he saw the light and joined country policing at Burke, where he performed general duties. In April 1968, he was transferred to Oak Flats as the officer in charge of that police station. In July 1969, he was transferred to Bemboka, again as the officer in charge of that police station. On the 2nd of March 1977, he was transferred to Goulburn, performing general duties. And on the 5th of January 1980, he was transferred to Narandra, again performing general duties. In May 1989, he was transferred to Leeton, performing general duties. And his final posting was on the 31st of January 1994 to Foster as the patrol tactician. His awards: he was awarded the National Medal in December 1980 and the first class to the National Medal on the 28th of October 1988. And the family will shortly be presented also with the National Police Service Medal in recognition of his service. I'll now recite the Police Ode, which is read for those former officers who have since passed. As the sun surely sets, dawn will see it arise. For service above self demands its own prize. You have fought the good fight, life's race has been run, and peace your reward for eternity begun. And we that are left shall never forget. Rest in peace, friend and colleague, for the sun has now set. We will remember, hasten the dawn.
Thank you, sir. We're now going to hear the eulogy by Rosalind and David. Of Ryan and David, sorry. Rosalind and Ryan. Yes. Oh, yes. There you go.
It looks like a novel, but it's not. I just had to print it really big so I could read it. Oh, excuse me. Okay. David Scott Hamilton, loving son, brother, husband, father, grandfather, uncle, cousin, friend, and for me, my dad, affectionately known as Pop. Pop was born on the 22nd December 1940 at the Royal North Shore Hospital in St Leonard, Sydney. He was the first and only son born to his parents, Angus and Olive Hamilton, and was to be the older and only brother and sibling to his much-loved and cherished sister Mary, now Mary Collis. He spent his infant years living in Fox Street, Lane Cove, before his family moved to Alt Street, Ashfield, in 1945, where he would remain throughout his primary and high school years until he later met and married the love of his life, Lorraine. David started primary school in 1946 at De La Salle Primary School in Ashfield, but that wasn't for long, as his mother Olive took him out of there because Dad was bullied for being a Protestant and in a Catholic school. And that was the way of the world back then, the Catholics and Protestants always arguing. I believe this was the defining moment that stayed with him and led him to turn away from any sort of religion. He would often say to me when religion would get a mention, "They preach love and acceptance, but mostly do the exact opposite. I just choose to be a good person and of good character." And he was. After finishing primary school, Dad attended Cleveland Street Boys High School in the city. Many people don't know this amazing fact about Dad, but he was dux of his year 7, which indicates his level of intelligence. Unfortunately for Dad, his inner demons would hold him back throughout his lifetime. Depression and anxiety was something he struggled with, but he still had a very productive and full life. Whilst Dad was in year 9 at high school, his father, Angus, became quite ill from osteomyelitis in his leg. Osteomyelitis, for those of you who don't know, is a type of bone disease that eats away at the bone. As a result, Angus had his leg amputated just above the knee. This was okay for a while until it was realised that not all the osteomyelitis had been removed. Angus then had a second amputation of his femur to just below the ball socket, which sat in his hip. Angus was sick for quite some time due to the infection, was unable to work. This is where Dad stepped up. Like he always did. And he left school in year 10 to get a job to support his parents, younger sister and grandmother who was living with them and had been bedridden due to a stroke 11 years earlier. With no social security or NDIS back then, it all fell back on Dad to provide the means for his family to live. This was a world away from how Dad provided for me at my age. I got to be a carefree teenager. He didn't. At the age of 16, Dad found full-time employment at the Sleepmaker mattress factory, not making mattresses, but working in the office. He had a very good head for mathematics and learnt bookwork and accounting skills there. A few years later, Dad changed employers to work in the accounting section of John Hines & Co. This was to be the best decision he said he ever made. Why? Because this is where he met Lorraine Montgomery. He'd always jokingly reminisce about the first day he laid eyes on her. Love at first sight, he'd said. God, she was a good sort. And so the love affair began. They met in 1962, married in 1965, and were together ever since. In 1963, Dad decided he wanted a career outside of office work and signed up for the New South Wales Police Force. Back then, it was a crash course in policing at the Redfern Academy, and then they let him loose on the streets of Sydney and later Bourke. Bravery awards back then weren't given like they are today. If they were, I know of several incidents that would have put a medal on Dad's chest. Such was the nature of Dad and others of that era. They did what needed to be done, and they did it without recognition. After moving to Bemboka in 1969, Dad was blessed with the birth of his second daughter, Marilyn. It was in the small farming community of Bemboka that Dad thrived. He helped facilitate the first community credit union for the town, of which he was secretary, joined the Bemboka Lions Club, and was a staunch supporter of the local Bush Nursing Association and was instrumental in organising community fundraising to keep the Bemboka surgery open. The community of Bemboka, although really small, provided a thriving social life for Dad and his young family. Many a great party was hosted by Dad and Mum, of course, at the old stables/garage at the rear of the police station, which was then reciprocated on many a farm, and some wonderful friendships were forged. Dad was well respected in Bemboka as the local policeman, but it was a lot more than that. Dad was a smart, responsible, and very decent man, and that's what earned him that respect as the man behind the badge. It was at Bemboka that Dad developed his love of aerodynamics and outer space. He was indeed a bookworm and loved to learn about the science of how things worked. Model planes were never an option. It was straight into radio-controlled model aeroplanes. For months, parts and pieces would arrive in the post for Dad's new hobby. To the side of Bemboka Police Station was the police station office and courtroom. It was accessed through a door off our spare bedroom, which also moonlighted as the magistrates' quarters when court would sit every few months. If only the police force and judicial system knew how well their mahogany bench top served as a building platform for Dad's private aircraft construction. The short story is, Dad had a couple of good takeoffs, flying and landings of his model plane at the club airfield near Bega, but he crashed it shortly thereafter into a crumpled mess. For all the preparation that led up to this monumentous event, he decided that it wasn't worth all the effort. With the love of flight still surging through his blood, hang gliding seemed like the next step for Dad, and so this became his next project. For Dad, it was understanding and making something that explained what he learnt. His hang glider eventually hung from the roof of the Bemboka police garage while it took shape. Dad always considered himself the foreman in situations because of his disinterest in sport and subsequent lack of physical prowess. So he roped in a friend to pilot his newly constructed flying contraption. When his pilot, Uncle Frank as he was affectionately known, ran down the hillside strapped to the hang glider and nose-dived into the ground on their maiden 5-second airborne flight, Dad decided this may not be for him also. I might add that Uncle Frank broke his leg in the crash landing 2 weeks out from his wedding, and Mum and Auntie Lynn were just a tad bit upset with the pair of them. Dad thought, a good reason to move on, and he did. Many years later at Leeton, he tried gliding, but it was eventually the lure of outer space and space travel that he really loved. After leaving Bemboka, Dad took his family to Goulburn with a police transfer in 1977 for a period of 3 years. During this time, and thanks to Dad, our family was blessed when we again made some lifelong family friends who are with us today. It was Dad's honesty, character, and genuineness that gave him the ability to connect so strongly to the friends he made. It was in Goulburn that Dad and I really bonded over our love of science fiction when he took Marilyn and I to the drive-in to watch Star Wars. He'd never disappoint either, and at intermission we got ice cream, soft drink and chocolate. The three of us perched up in the front of the old Holden, Marilyn and I getting spoilt by Dad and watching an awesome movie. It's a memory I'll always treasure. Dad and I went on to watch many a good sci-fi movie together after that, and as such, he would feel very comfortable telling me all about the things he learnt on outer space and space travel. In the summer of 1980, Dad received his transfer from Goulburn to Narrandera. For me, these were some of the best years of my life with Dad. He built us a beautiful home at Pine Hill, Narrandera, where we had our own bedroom and what I think every teenager desired, an in-ground swimming pool. It was these years that I look back on and remember what a hard worker Dad was when he put his mind to something. When he gutted and reconstructed the inside of the old farmhouse he bought for us to live in, he would do so from daylight to dusk, day in and day out on his days off and holidays. Most of that work was done in 40-degree heat and often by himself. It was during my high school years that I really appreciated Dad's character and smarts. If I was ever stuck on a math problem, needed to know some historical fact, or just wanted the plain simple truth, Dad was my go-to guy. Of course, Dad's honest opinion would sometimes come at a price, as he didn't sugarcoat it, and tact wasn't always his strongest quality. Needless to say, if I was feeling fragile, Dad got a wide berth. Dad was a really great dad in many ways, though. He drove all the way to Lismore in his holidays with Mum and helped landscape my home and cement our driveway. At Eden, he helped paint my house and again some landscaping. If he had a skill and I needed help, he was always there. The same applied to Marilyn. From Narandra, Dad and Mum moved to Leeton, followed by Eden. At Leeton, I introduced Dad to Rod, who later became the father of Dad's two other greatest loves, his grandsons Ryan and Connor. Dad grew to love Rod like he would love no other young man. And that was because he was like a son. Dad would always tell people, Rodney is the son I never had. From December 2000 until December 2020, 20 years in fact, Dad called Eden home. He was a motel manager shared between family for the first 10 years, then accepted retirement due to ill health. During his motel experience as Australia's own Basil Fawlty, and that is no joke, Dad would entertain Probus Club tours. He'd welcome groups, entertain them with jokes and stories, dress up for theme nights, and was the resident Santa Claus for our Christmas in Julys. And he never failed to impress. The older he got, the more chilled he became, and crazier his antics. In 2011, Dad had open heart surgery and had an aortic valve replacement. As a result of the surgery, he suffered a very minor stroke to his frontal lobe area that was relatively undetected. It's unknown whether this was instrumental in bringing on his dementia or it would have occurred anyway. As he was now officially retired, he got to read and surf the internet to his heart's content. In 2018, Dad and Mum moved in with Connor and I in Eden. Dad was going along okay physically, but his dementia was becoming more significant in the way of mood and behaviours. It was in these last years, and when we moved to Goulburn in 2021, that Dad was either adorable and a riot to be around or a little gremlin. Either way, he was still always lovable. Up until 10 weeks before Dad passed and his physical health rapidly declined, which transgressed to his rapid mental decline, he was always worrying about Mum. He'd check on her through the night and you'd always see him sitting beside her in the lounge room and would often put his hand out to hold hers, as he did with us too. He just got very touchy-feely at the end. He loved her immensely and cherished every minute she was with him. It was really sweet to watch. You always knew where you stood with Dad, and he had no reservations of telling you what he was thinking. Mum was always the entertainer in the family and often joked around, and on occasions when Dad thought it completely inappropriate, he would tell her as only Dad could. And I quote, "Lorraine, you're impossible. The dumb blonde act might have been cute in your 20s, but not anymore." And that's how the fight started. Dad was fiercely loyal and loved very deeply, and he couldn't handle bullshit. His circle of friends was small, but those he kept close were those he truly respected and cared for, and I know it was very much a mutual and very respectful admiration between both. He had some very significant male friendships during his life. 5 of those friendships really stand out to me. They're very special because Dad thought they were special, and he wasn't one to have lots of friends. He preferred intelligent conversation and a dry wit, and wasn't fond of crowds. Dad to me was always so honest and showed real integrity in that way, and the friends he chose were those he compared to his own set of standards and values. I'm sure Dad would like me to mention those that to me I knew he really cared for and respected, and were significant in my life as a result. Charlie Spare, now passed, whom I knew more about than actually spending time with, from Dad chatting about their adventures and always with a smile on his face. He met Charlie quite young. Then Uncle Eddie Shimshell, who was a constant in my life and always looked forward to time with Dad. Uncle Stan Walton, now passed, who was like a grandfather to me and loved to talk sense with Dad. Neither had time for silly. Uncle Rod Collis, who always supported Dad's relationship with Auntie Mary. And finally, Mr. B, Dave Burke, who would come and visit Dave regularly over the years. They'd sit and talk for hours, which was almost unheard of for Dad. You always stayed in contact with him and were present for important occasions when Dad requested your attendance. They all meant a lot to Dad, and he knew you regarded him well. Dad did have other great friends too, but these men I mentioned were significant to my life with Dad and were always a constant, and helped me see the man who was my father. They let me get to know my dad through their eyes, and it was enlightening. Referring back to Dad's other most treasured people in his life, his grandsons. Ryan and Chronic growing up were the absolute apple of his eye and his greatest weakness. He suddenly went from being called David or Dad to Pop or Poppy. When Ryan and Connie came on the scene, many new people who entered Pop's life sometimes didn't even know his name, as we all referred to him as Pop. He was helplessly at their mercy and loved every minute of it. Every little achievement they had, he broadcast to whoever would listen. He was just so proud of them, and they gave him a great gift, that of acceptance without judgment and unconditional love. Pop, throughout his lifetime, became known for his words of wisdom, or not so full of wisdom, but random and very funny. Often accompanied at some point by his hilarious stunned mullet look, which was never done with the intention of causing laughter. Sometimes he was so wrapped up in his own thoughts and oblivious to others and their perspective that when confronted with reality, he'd get this complete look of mystified, deer in the headlights, shocked disbelief on his face. That look was just so animated that you couldn't help but laugh, and was signature Pop. Pop's antics over the years and his reactions to events that took place are now the highlight of many a memory that leaves us laughing and remembering good times. He would say things from out of nowhere and in all seriousness that begged for a response that was in no way what he was expecting. A classic example was one told to me by Marilyn. She was visiting Mum and Dad at Foster to seek some emotional support following a very difficult time in her life. The 3 of them were in Mum and Dad's bedroom, and Marilyn was sitting on the side of their bed. She'd been crying her eyes out and pouring out her heart about her marriage breakdown and the pain she was feeling. Whilst Mum tried to console her and offer comfort, Dad laid there quietly listening until he decided it was time for him to be the caring and empathetic father figure he thought she needed and was expecting. His words of understanding and consolement went something like this. Yes, Marilyn, I know exactly how you feel. I have had no end of trouble trying to book this holiday to Bali. It's been nothing but headaches. Marilyn said, well, at least I stopped crying. Sometimes I really thought Palop sat somewhere on the spectrum. Regardless, Dad was always a good-hearted person and did many things for those close to him, quite often without letting anyone know. He was never one to outwardly seek praise and preferred not to be the centre of attention, even though many times he was. Dad was always a good and respectful man with a very good moral compass and big heart. Dad was not at all into silly, which he really struggled with, being surrounded by his three women, Mum, Marilyn and I, who loved silly. This is why I loved him as my father and why I'll always love the person he was. Love you, Dad.
Good morning, everyone. As the grandson of David, or as I knew him, Pop, I'd like to thank you all for being here, whether that's in person or watching online. Pop was a bit of a self-conscious man, and he sometimes would underestimate how much people really loved him. And I have no doubt that he'd be proud and surprised by the outpouring of love today. I just want to share a couple of stories with you about the kind of person my Pop was. Pop was a caring person who loved his family, particularly his grandsons. I'm constantly reminded by my aunt and mum that they could never get away with half the things me and my brother would. In our eyes, he was the embodiment of altruism, dropping everything he was doing to make sure our needs were being met. He was always there for his grandsons. Whether that was picking us up from school, making sure we were fed with a hot meal while mum and dad were busy, or paying the $45 late fee on the movies, which we forgot to return. You could always rely on Pop to help you out in a pinch, and he'd never ask for anything in return. Just a simple thank you would do. Pop also had a love for all things science and science fiction. It was infectious. Whenever I swung by their place in Eden to hang out with him and Nan, I'd often catch him in his computer room, diving deep into Science Weekly, or catching up on what his best mate Elon Musk was up to in space that week. If he wasn't on the computer, you'd catch him flipping through the pages of his Kindle e-reader, reading science fiction, in his mind probably flying through the galaxy off on adventures. He wasn't exactly a chatterbox, but let me tell you, get him started on anything science related and he'd go on for hours. It was like flipping a switch. From the latest space mission to cool scientific breakthroughs, he was all in. See him get all excited, chatting about black holes and new gadgets, you could just tell that science was his thing. Just wasn't about facts and figures. It was about the wonder of it all. And being there and listening to him as a young kid go on about the mysteries of space, it was pretty bloody cool. He also never failed to make you laugh in worrying moments. He was undisputed king of what I call accidental slapstick. His antics leaving unforgettable memories of laughter and mishaps. Take, for instance, his legendary portrayal of Santa Claus during Christmas in July at the motel for bus groups. He dressed in the iconic red suit and he set out to spread cheer, but that wasn't always the case, and often he'd come into mishap on his journey to the venue. Picture this, Santa arriving at your retirement bus tour on the back of a loud rumbling road bike carrying a sack of old people gifts. Pretty cool, I know. Normally this would work without a hitch. Santa would arrive in the car park, give his merriest ho ho ho, and start handing out gifts. However, sometimes fate had other plans. One time, Santa arrived on the back of the motorcycle, making a grand entrance, and midway up the driveway, the engine stalled. This caused the bike to fall over to one side, sending Pop tumbling down the driveway. A moment of chaos ensued as he rolled down the driveway, a flurry of red and white mixed with black from the asphalt. When he finally stopped rolling at the bottom of the driveway, in true Pop fashion, he jumped up, dusted himself off, flung his arms above his head in the air, 2 thumbs up, and continued with the show, turning what could have been a moment of embarrassment into a display of humour. In the archives of family law, that day became synonymous with Pop's unmatched ability to turn even the clumsiest situations into moments of laughter. These stories are just a snippet into the amazing man my Pop was. He was all these moments and so much more. As we bid farewell to Pop today, I'd like to celebrate the richness of his life and the legacy he leaves behind. Pop's actions spoke volumes about the love he had for his family and friends, his unwavering protection of loved ones, and his curiosity about the world around him. Rest in peace, Pop. I love you, mate.
Sì, lo so che non c'era una stanza quando manca il sole. Se non ci sei tu, con me, sì. Le finestre mostrano il mio cuore che è acceso. Chiudi dentro me la luce che hai incontrato per strada. Trying to say goodbye.
Tu sei lontana, sogno all'orizzonte, manca le parole. Io sì lo so che sei con me, mia luna, tu sei qui con me. Io sole, tu sei qui con me, con me, con me, con me. Time to say goodbye. Paesi che non ho mai vissuto con te. Adesso sì li vivrò con te. Partirò su navi per mari che io non so. Con te io su navi per mari
Wonderful memories there, and I'm sure as the day goes on, there'll be plenty more stories and memories that will be shared. As we think of David's life and all that it has meant to us, it may help to consider these words that Leanne is going to read to us.
When I come to the end of my journey and I travel my last weary mile, just forget if you can that I ever frowned and remember only the smile. Forget unkind words I have spoken, remember some good I have done. Forget that I ever had heartache and remember I've had loads of fun. Forget that I've stumbled and blundered and sometimes fell by the way. Remember I've fought some hard battles and won ere the close of the day. Then forget to grieve for my going. I would not have you sad for a day, but in summer just gather some flowers and remember the place where I lay. And come in the evening when the sun paints the sky in the west, stand for a few moments beside me and remember only my best.
At a time such as this, it's appropriate to reflect on those words as we endeavour to reach our own inner peace. Nothing can now detract from the joys and wonderful life experiences that we've shared with David, and nothing can possibly affect the happiness and the depth of experiences and relationships that he knew. What has been forever. The past, with all of its meaning and accompanying emotions, is sacred and secure within your hearts and minds. Your love and regard for David and his love and regard for you, his family and friends can be remembered and celebrated and cannot now be altered by time and circumstance. We are grateful that David was and will forever remain a part of our lives. His influence endures in the unending consequences flowing from his courage, his sense of independence, his strength of character, his versatility, and his many, many accomplishments during his life. Those qualities will endure forever in our own acts and thoughts, and we shall always remember him as a living and very vital presence. That memory will bring a certain warmth and refreshment to our hearts and strengthen us in times of trouble. Let no one fear death, it is natural as life, and we must always remember that no one experiences death as only life can be experienced. When the end comes, the memories, happy and sad, will live on forever in our hearts and continue to enrich our lives. This is a sad day, but not an unhappy one, as it should also be a celebration of the good life and vibrant personality that has been. I'd now like to invite those that wish to join me in reciting the traditional version of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Before we proceed to the final part of today's service, David's family sincerely thank you for being here today and invite you to join with them at the Goulburn Soldiers Club following today's service for refreshments and to continue sharing memories. Now, the curtain will close soon, but please don't be alarmed. Mary, who will be doing the final reading after the curtain closes. We're now going to have a time of reflection whilst we listen to Ave Maria, and that's going to be sung by Emilio. So, Emilio, if you want to take to your position. During this time, I'd like to invite David's family first to come forward and place a sprig of rosemary in remembrance on his coffin, followed by anyone else that wishes to. Friends, the time has now come to say our final farewell to David, as with the tenderness and reverence that are his due, we commit him to the elements. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, from which all life comes and to which all life in the end returns. Hereby may we highly resolve that while we live, we will strive with all our might to make our living of real worth. Thus, in the consciousness of work well done and a life well lived, death can have no sting. We pray that David Scott Hamilton will now be forever at peace and free from the intensities of any illness, pain, or the troubles of this earthly existence. As we depart this place of peace and tranquility, let us do so with quietness of spirit, as we now remember David with the love and affection that are his due. Secure in the knowledge that David is now truly and eternally at peace. I'd now like to call upon David's sister, Mary Collis, who will be reading on behalf of Lorraine Hamilton.
David, a million times I've needed you. A million times I've cried. If love alone could have saved you, you never would have died. In life, I loved you dearly. In death, I loved you still. In my heart, you hold a place that no one else can ever fill. It broke my heart to lose you, but you didn't go alone. Part of me went with you the day God took you home.
We pray that David has now found peace, reunited with those who have gone before, secure in the prayers, the thoughts and memories of those who knew and loved him. Amen.
Perhaps love is like a resting place, a shelter from the storm. It exists to give you comfort. It is there to keep you warm. In those times of trouble, when you are most alone, the memory of love will bring you home. Perhaps love is like a window, perhaps an open door. It invites you to come closer. It wants to show you more. Even if you lose yourself and don't know what to do, the memory of love will see you through. Oh, love to some is like a cloud, to some is strong as steel. For some a way of living, for some a way to feel. And some say love is holding on, and some say letting go. And some say love is everything, and some say they don't know. Perhaps love is like the ocean, full of conflict, full of change, like a fire when it's cold outside, or thunder when it rains. If I should live forever and all my dreams come true, my memories of love will be of you.